During the 163 years that it has been occupied, the White House has become the central symbol of the American experience. The center of America has, almost by chance, located itself in a building whose dimensions are a modest 90 feet by 180 feet. 35 presidents, the power of a continent, and the continuity of 188 years of our republic center themselves in this simple Georgian building. 35 men have come and gone, but the President's House and the presidency have remained. These are the men who have occupied the office of the Presidency of the United States. George Washington, first President of the United States, inaugurated 1789, served 8 years. John Adams, inaugurated 1797, served 4 years. Thomas Jefferson, inaugurated in 1801, served 8 years. James Madison, inaugurated 1809, served 8 years. James Monroe, inaugurated in 1817, served 8 years. John Quincy Adams, inaugurated 1825, the only son of a president to become a president, served 4 years. Andrew Jackson, inaugurated 1829, served 8 years. On January 30th, 1835, for the first time in the history of America, an attempt was made to assassinate a president. President Jackson escaped 2 pistol shots from a distance of 6 feet. Martin Van Buren, 1837, served 4 years. William Henry Harrison, inaugurated in 1841, he died 1 month after taking office. John Tyler, inaugurated 1841, served 3 years and 11 months. James K. Polk, inaugurated 1845, served 4 years. Zachary Taylor, inaugurated 1849, served 16 months. Millard Fillmore, inaugurated 1850, served 2 years and 8 months. Franklin Pierce, inaugurated 1853, served 4 years. James Buchanan, inaugurated 1857, served 4 years. The 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, inaugurated in 1861. His wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, said of the events of April 14th, 1865, "He was more cheerful and joyous that day and evening than he had been for years. At dinner he complained of being worn out and proposed to go to the theater and have a laugh. At the theater, I sat close to him and was leaning on his lap. I asked him, 'What will Miss Harris think of my hanging on to you so?' He said, 'She won't think anything about it.' And the fatal shot was fired, his last words being an answer to my question." Andrew Johnson, inaugurated 1865. Although Johnson attempted to carry out Lincoln's policies, he did not have the personal weight of the murdered president. The continuity of the presidency continued, but the nation was altered in its course. Ulysses S. Grant, May 1869, served 8 years. Rutherford Hayes, inaugurated 1877, served 4 years. James A. Garfield, inaugurated in 1881, shot on the morning of July 2nd, 1881, by a disappointed office seeker, died September 19th. Unlike the assassination of Lincoln, the death of Garfield led to no great social or political changes. Chester Alan Arthur, inaugurated 1881, served 3 years and 6 months. Grover Cleveland, inaugurated for the first time in 1885, served 4 years. Benjamin Harrison, inaugurated 1889, served 4 years. Grover Cleveland was inaugurated for the second time in 1893. William McKinley, inaugurated in 1897. This picture was taken 15 minutes before a man wearing a bandage on his right hand approached the president and shot him. 8 days later, President McKinley died. Theodore Roosevelt, who had been McKinley's vice president, was inaugurated in 1901. In 1912, when Theodore Roosevelt was no longer in office but was campaigning for a 3rd term, a maniac shot the former president but did not kill him. This photograph was taken as the wounded president continued his speech. William Howard Taft, inaugurated 1909, served 4 years. Woodrow Wilson, inaugurated 1913, served 8 years. Warren Harding, inaugurated 1921, died in office in 1923. His vice president was Calvin Coolidge, inaugurated in 1923. Coolidge, a sober, quiet man, did much to restore America's belief in the presidency, a belief that had been seriously shaken by the revelations of scandal and corruption which were traceable to officers of Harding's cabinet. Herbert Hoover, inaugurated 1929, served 4 years. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd man to become President of the United States, inaugurated in 1933, served 12 years and 3 months. On February 15th, 1933, an attempt at assassination was made. Roosevelt was unhurt, but the mayor of Chicago was killed. Harry S. Truman became President of the United States upon the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Inaugurated 1945, on November 1st, 1950, 2 men tried to assassinate President Truman. A White House guard was killed. Dwight Eisenhower, inaugurated 1953, served 8 years. John F. Kennedy, inaugurated 1961, assassinated November 22nd, 1963, served 2 years, 10 months. Lyndon Johnson, sworn in November 22nd, 1963. So ends the roll call of presidents. 35 men have been masters of the executive mansion. 8 men have died in office. These are the floors they paced, the rooms they saw. History has flowed in and out of these rooms. 185 million Americans, a nation that spans the continent, a people most scientifically advanced, a complex of machines and technology beyond anything the world has ever seen. All this ties itself to this center and to the man who lives here. The president may die. The presidency does not. John F. Kennedy, the 35th President of the United States, who died yesterday in his 47th year, was the 8th president to give up his life while serving in the nation's highest office. 4 of those predecessors who died in office were murdered as he was. The other 4, William Henry Harrison in 1841, Zachary Taylor in 1850, Warren Harding in 1923, Franklin Roosevelt in 1945, died natural deaths. Mr. Kennedy's assassination occurs within a system structured to withstand personal tragedy of the highest order. The United States of America has survived total war. It has survived the death of the most powerful. It will survive even this shocking assassination. The United States Constitution provides for an orderly succession in the event of disaster similar to that which struck at us yesterday. In 1850, on the death of Zachary Taylor, who passed away after only 1 month in office, we were faced with our first emergency in terms of the presidential succession. Until that time, all presidents had lived out their terms. Following Taylor's death, John Tyler took office. And it's interesting to note that there were those who called him acting president. Others continued to refer to him as vice president. Mr. Tyler, in time, took care of the issue. He referred to himself as president, and the people obviously accepted his claim. In 1865, almost a century ago, the nation suffered a shattering blow when Abraham Lincoln was shot to death at Ford's Theater. Here at the close of the Civil War was a time when anarchy and a reign of terror were possible. Andrew Johnson's succession to the presidency was riddled with question marks. Indeed, he was impeached by the House of Representatives and came close to removal from his high office. But there was never any question as to popular acceptance of Andrew Johnson as President of the United States. In 1881, when James Garfield was shot to death by a disappointed office seeker, he lay gravely ill for months before dying, yet the processes of government continued relatively unhampered. When Chester Arthur assumed the presidency, he was clothed in all the dignity Americans give their chief executive. Barely 3 decades later, within the memory of some living Americans, William McKinley was shot to death by a maniac as he engaged in one of the president's key ceremonial functions, handshaking. He was succeeded by one of the most vigorous executives in American history, Theodore Roosevelt. When Franklin D. Roosevelt died on the eve of victory in World War II, America was shaken as it had not been shaken since the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Harry Truman, the new president, said, I feel as though the moon and stars have fallen in on me. He was greeted with sympathy and understanding. In a short time, there was no doubt as to his assumption of the command of the nation's first office. When Dwight D. Eisenhower suffered his heart attack and later his serious illness, ileitis, there was much speculation in the high councils of the nation as to the role of the vice president. But government continued. Mr. Nixon never indicated any desire to interfere with orderly processes, and when the president's recovery was complete, the country turned its eyes from the possible tragedy with which it had been confronted. Nevertheless, the succession of presidential tragedies over the years had made Americans aware of the importance of the line of succession. Congress, during the course of the history of the nation, has enacted 3 presidential statutes. The first, in 1792, declared that the president pro tempore of the Senate, and then the Speaker of the House, would assume the office of the presidency in case of the death or disability of the president or vice president. In January 1886, shortly after the assassination of Garfield, Congress repealed the Act of 1792 and provided that if the president and the vice president died or became disabled, then the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, and on down the cabinet would assume the office of the presidency. In 1947, 2 years after the death of President Roosevelt, the statute presently in force was enacted by Congress. If the president and vice president are unable to fulfill the office of the presidency, the Speaker of the House, at present Representative John McCormick, will assume the presidency. This is a chart in which the succession to the presidency as presently constituted is outlined. This chart reflects the law of the land. Whatever the legalities, whatever the background, Americans have invariably rallied to the successor of the man struck down in the midst of his service as the nation's chief executive. To that role, it is expected that President Lyndon B. Johnson will be no exception.